I'm going to go ahead and get started. Hello, everybody. So welcome to our, I want to say like 5th or 6th or maybe more practice session for Flute Reboot. This is so awesome. I see this community growing every day, and I'm seeing I'm seeing these sessions grow all the time, and I just love it. I think you guys are awesome, and I'm so glad you're all here. So today we are going to talk about Trevor Wye and tackling Trevor Wye and all of his wisdom. So his books can be a lot. There's a lot of information, and there's actually a lot to talk about. And I would love for this meeting in particular to be a little bit more of a discussion than prior meetings. So I'm going to make sure that, there are moments where we pause and talk about things. And if you have questions, feel free to jump in. I will try to check the chat periodically, but for the most part, I'm just looking for you guys to jump in and talk. So feel free to do that. That's not a problem at all. All right, it's about 7:05, so I'm actually going to go ahead and get started. So like I said, this is our probably 5th or 6th weekly flute practice for Flute Reboot. Whoops. Did not mean to do that. I'm sorry, guys. All right, who am I? My name is Cassie, aka the Tattooed Flute Teacher. If you follow me on any of my socials, I am a flute teacher. I specialize in not just working with brand new students, but also working with students that are restarting their instrument after a hiatus, be that a couple of months, a couple of years, 30 years. I myself went through a bit of a hiatus at one point in my playing. I got super burnout and stopped. And so going through that process of restarting my instrument really inspired me to, in my teaching life, build towards helping people that want that as well, because a lot of us are restarted for mental health reasons, for to try to find a hobby outside of our work, things like that, and I just love that. So I'm a wedding and event musician. I'm also an online flute teacher. Formerly worked in music tech. So I specialized in recording, content creation, all that good stuff, dealing with all of the technology that comes with music. I am a mindfulness mentor and a burnout prevention specialist. I love all these little titles. All right. So tackling Trevor Wye. This is a whole thing, guys. So I got multiple requests on this. We had a lot of people vote for this. So clearly this is a popular topic. Clearly this is something that people feel very passionate about, because let's be honest, Trevor Wye is kind of a beast. He has so much knowledge. He has written so many books. He has done so many amazing things, but it can be so intimidating to jump into. So what we want to do is kind of break it down for everybody to be able to actually pick this book up and play out of it a little bit after this, hopefully. And for those of you that have never joined us, what we like to do is have this topic, and then we go into a group warm-up, and then we practice on our own. I would love to see everybody practicing out of some Trevor Wye today, but you don't have to. You can practice whatever you'd like, and then ask questions as they come up. So, tackling Trevor Wye. So, common books that are in the Trevor Wye repertoire, I guess, would be the practice books for the flute. This is the omnibus version. So this is 1 through 5. There's actually a 6th book that comes in the new omnibus. This book's about 15-ish years old. So this is the older version. As you can see, it has been well loved. So we have 1 through 5 in here, and then 6 is the advanced practice. There is also, a few of you mentioned that you have the complete daily exercises for the flute. This is also a good one. We will talk a little bit about this one, but my main focus is going to be practice books for the flute, because that seems to be the most intimidating for most people. He's also written several other works that kind of go along with the actual like practice books. Flute Secrets, this is his latest work. This is fantastic. Proper flute playing is actually a direct, I guess, it goes along with the practice book. So it's a lot more reading, but it goes along with the practice books directly. He references them back and forth several times. And then, of course, you have practice book for the piccolo. You also have practice books for alto flute. And then one of the older ones that I also like is looking at more efficient practice on the flute. This is, again, a lot of it, at least in the first half, it's a lot of reading. And then the last little bit, he's got some daily exercises. But again, these are great books, but what we are going to focus on today is practice books. And with that, we do have to talk about proper flute playing. So, what books are you guys using? Anybody want to jump in?
I've kind of done a lot with the Trevor Wye, with the omnibus, and I do have proper flute playing as well. And the I should have got them all out, and the scale, the daily practice book.
Nice.
But I've been working a lot with the Patricia George scales as well.
Yeah, those are great too. Yeah, for sure. Anybody else want to chime in? What books they've got? What books? You don't even necessarily have to have worked on them. I know that a lot of people have this one and have just never touched it because it's intimidating, right? All right. So we're going to talk about where to begin. We're going to talk about practice strategies, and we're going to talk about the fact that this is a lifelong pursuit. Sorry, I got ahead of myself a little bit. But again, with these common books, he has written tons of material. This isn't even close to all of his works. I mean, he has flute class, there's a lot. And with that, he's extremely wordy. Which is fine. He has a lot of detail and a lot of knowledge to share, but that can be extremely intimidating. So don't feel bad. Again, you are not alone here. So where to begin? Specifically, practice books for the flute. You'll notice that there are, again, 5 books. We have tone, technique, articulation, intonation and vibrato, breathing and scales, and then the advanced practice book. So I like to think of the omnibus kind of as a choose your own adventure. Anybody else remember having those books where you'd flip through? It's like it would ask you a question and then you would like flip to page 25 depending on what your answer was. Anybody else remember those? Because I used to love those. I had one that was like a James Bond. And I loved
to read all the endings.
Yep. I did that too. I think they did a couple of like Nancy Drew ones too, which were pretty popular. Anyway, I like to think of Trevor Wye that way. choose your own adventure. I will say that the tone book, which is the first book, is actually, in my opinion, the least intimidating place to start. It can feel extremely intimidating when you start flipping through and just looking at random pages, because you're like, what is going on here? And, you know, giant blocks of text plus giant blocks of notation can be really scary. So, starting in book 1, truly at the beginning with tone, you can start as simple as, let's just do harmonics today. And he does a really great job of labeling his exercises by number. So, you know, you've got, in a section, you'll have 1, 2, 3, and 4. So ideally, you're working on those 4 during a practice session. And then kind of once you get the concept, moving on to the next exercise. Now, the beautiful thing, again, is that he does label very well. So if you're struggling with a particular register, you can jump specifically to middle register, for instance. I don't know if Greg is in here, but that's what we started with, middle register. And I know I've got Wendy working on intro to high register. So kind of depending on what you're struggling with, especially in the tone book, you can really jump into and go, okay, today I would like, or this week or this month, I would like to work on my middle register. I'm struggling with my middle register. You don't necessarily have to play all of these things in order. It is helpful if you don't know what you're really struggling with or need a little bit of direction. He starts with low, goes to middle, and then goes to, yes.
So I have a question on the harmonics part, because he only goes into 1 page of harmonics,
yes,
and it's only on C. Is it implied that you would move on from C to the other notes in doing harmonics?
You can, yeah. I typically will just have my students doing it on C, because you kind of get the general gist of what's going on with C. But, you know, he does mention at the bottom to repeat with C sharp, D natural, and E flat.
But he's not worried about the others, so he kind of...
Yeah, I mean, those are the main ones that you're going to get the most out of it if you're doing C, C sharp, D, E flat.
Okay, cool.
Sure. Yeah.
All right, thanks.
Yeah. So, that said, you know, if you, like, for instance, I did a total articulation reboot in myself. I say reboot. Recently. And with that, I literally just went to the articulation book and I started, I can't remember exactly what page it's on, but, oh, I have it marked. So I went to the articulation book. I didn't necessarily start with slurs because that's not what I was struggling with, but I jumped over to single tonguing and double tonguing because that is what I wanted to work on for myself. So again, this is really dependent on what is causing you problems or what you feel like is a pain point. So I feel like everybody should be working out of the tone book, but again, if articulation is the struggle right now, jumping into the articulation book and practicing by section. So again, he is very good about labeling the exercises as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, you know, in this section. So you could pick, I'm going to work on 1, 2, 3 today, and then tomorrow or next week, I'm going to work on 4, 5, 6. It's a good way to do it, in my opinion. Common books, where to begin. Also, again, Flute Secrets. He has some very great strategies written. Now, with Trevor's strategies, he does reference other books, and some of these are a little bit on the advanced side. So like he references a lot of Moyes, like Technical Mastery for the Virtuoso Flutist, and his advanced book. So this is a little bit on the advanced side, but he actually does write a pretty good prescription for working on technique, things like that in Flute Secrets. So that's a great one. And again, also following along kind of with proper flute playing, there's a lot of good nuggets in there that kind of reference back and forth. Now, that said, one thing that I will say about Trevor Wye, and while I do love teaching from his methods, some of his stuff is a little bit on the dated side. In some instances, he has a lot of knowledge to share, and there's a lot of really fantastic wisdom, but there are some things that you might look and go, And I also want to point out that when he was writing these exercises, his intent was not for you to kill yourself playing them. His intent was not for, students to slave away just playing his exercises. So remember that. A lot of his stuff is extremely helpful, can build technique, can build good tone, but if you are finding yourself feeling absolutely miserable slaving away at a specific exercise, move on. It's okay. It's okay. That's one flute teacher's opinion. Others might have other opinions about that. I also want to mention with complete daily exercises, there is a practice card that comes with it. It's a little complicated, and same with looking at more efficient practice. His practice prescription from this book is a little complex, but it makes a lot of sense, and it does add some variety because you're kind of jumping through different things every day, which is kind of nice. Same with Moyes's 480 scale games. That's another good one to kind of jump through and do different things every day. If you're like me and your brain just has trouble playing the same thing over and over and over and over and over again, that's a great way to go about it. All right. Anybody have any questions so far? Like I said, I'd love to make sure that this is a conversation. Jump in if anything comes to mind. Cool.
I have a comment.
Yeah.
I was just looking up his biography, and what's interesting to me and what jumps out is that he didn't go to conservatory. He didn't go to music school. He didn't even study music in college or university. He studied with Marcel Moyes and some other people. So that kind of, I find that inspirational, that he didn't go the recommended path, that he kind of sought out people to work with and did it like that.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I feel like we as a musical society are actually starting to get back to a little bit. And without going off the rails and getting too, I don't know, political, I guess, we are, due to the cost of college and other things like that, we are seeing a lot more musicians going back to the whole, hey, I'm just going to study with a teacher. That was a big reason why I chose not to go back and get my master's, because ultimately the cost didn't make sense when I could just continue working with a private instructor, and honing in on being a flutist. So, as a matter of fact, the instructor that I had been working with up until a couple of years ago, she actually got a chance to go and study directly with Trevor Wye at one point, and I was just completely fangirled out over that. I'm like, did you write everything down? Did you record everything? And she's like, oh, yes. So, but yeah, he is an incredible human, with so much wisdom, and the fact is that he had it figured out. Struggling with counting beyond the 4/4. Gretchen, could you maybe jump in and give me a little bit more information on that? What do you mean struggling to count? Do you mean like rhythms like 8th notes and 16th notes, or?
Yes, I do fine with the 4/4, but once I get past like the 6/8, that I'm completely lost in. And just sometimes I try to write it out underneath, just so that I can try to get the beat of it.
Sure.
And I tried clapping it first, and I just can't seem to catch on, and I come in late all the time. So I know that I'm counting incorrectly. So I just didn't know if there was some sort of workbook that I could practice writing out the count, or clapping the count, or maybe explaining the count a little bit more.
Let me get back to you.
Yeah, sure. Okay.
Yeah, let me get back to you on that as far as like something that's rhythm specific.
Okay.
Without pointing you to a theory book, I would rather. Yeah, let me think on it, and
Okay.
I will answer
I
that.
didn't know if there was anything in the Trevor Wye book that you have, because I don't have that book, but it's on my list to get now. So I didn't know if there was maybe something in there that would help me or not.
In his beginner books, actually, I forgot to point out, he does have beginner books. They're a little dry for kids, in my opinion, which is why I don't always teach out of them. As a matter of fact, yep. He has a whole section on 6/8.
Okay.
And he does talk a lot about rhythm. So that may be something that you want to start with, would be like, this is part 2. There's part 1 and part 2.
Okay.
But he goes a little bit more into just the basics of counting, the basics of that kind of thing.
Okay.
Okay. And then there are a couple of resources that I can post in the group that are just helpful for learning counting and rhythm and whatnot. So I can absolutely do that. Yeah.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. All right. So the only other thing that I will say as far as, where to begin in this slide particularly is add small amounts to your practice, especially in the beginning. Don't try to tackle large chunks out of multiple books. That's where I see the most people get overwhelmed and just drop it, is they're going, okay, well, I want to get through pages 95 to the end of the articulation book, and then I'm also going to work on, the whole section of high register in the tone book, and then I'm also going to work on technique. Be very careful with that. Work slowly and deliberately on this, because this is a lifetime book. This is not a book that we stop working out of. I mean, so you can see that I teach out of it. This is all of my like students' spots, but also I have my own stuff marked. These are things that you will continue to work on no matter how long you've been playing, honestly. So trying to just zip through the book is not going to be a good strategy.
I have a question.
Yes.
Sorry, I raised my hand because I don't like interrupting people.
Oh, no, you're fine. I just couldn't see you. Sorry.
No, it's okay. So when do you know when to move on to the next exercise? Like, say there's like the tone stuff in the beginning and you're playing, like, how would you even know when you're done with that exercise? Or I noticed in the technique it has the, these gizmos here.
What
Like, when
page
do you
is
know
that?
when to move on? In my book, it's 52. I have the omnibus thing. It's on page 52 for me.
I was going to say, my book might be a little different.
I just opened up to a random spot that looked like it had a bunch of notes.
Yeah, I mean, so I'd say that the technique sections and the articulation are going to be a little bit easier to know when to move on, right? Because you're going to be very clear on when that section is in good shape. Tone is a little bit more variable. So I would recommend recording yourself, listening for changes, and listening for improvements, and honestly just getting comfortable with the exercise, especially in tone, because again, the tone book is something that you're going to come back to forever. You will continue to get something out of the tone book when you return to it, no matter if you've been playing for a year or 15 years or 40 years.
So would you also maybe use a tuner when you're playing?
I would say that's probably more for the intonation book. But you can. I don't love constant tuner use. And this is a little bit of a side note. We do want to train our ears and we do want to use the tuner here and there, but we want to learn for our ears to be able to hear what's going on rather than relying on a piece of equipment to tell us if we're correct or not. You know, does that make sense?
So tone and intonation are different.
Yes. I mean, they're in the same kind of category, but intonation is going to refer to being in tune. Tone is going to refer more to tone quality, tone color, tone.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what you're going for in the tone book. You're learning how to add colors to your palette, how to, have that big, beautiful, resonant tone that we talk about. And again, I started working on, the tone book when I was, a few years into playing, and I still come back to it regularly. So it is a lifelong pursuit. And you will, but feeling comfortable with the exercise, like particularly in harmonics are a little bit easier to know when it's time to move on, because being able to play those exercises is a challenge in of itself. And being able to play them maybe not effortlessly, but bordering on effortlessly that's when it's time to move on to the next thing. But I also have students that use the harmonics warm-ups or use the harmonics to warm up, like this page. So that one you could just play forever and you would be in pretty good shape, honestly. Awesome. Yeah, so I mentioned lifelong pursuit. Remember, this is a marathon, not a sprint. We will be working on these exercises for your entire life as a flutist. You could come back to these over and over and over and over again and get new things out of them as you grow as a musician and as a flutist. So it's important to remember that. powering your way through. I saw a couple of Reddit threads where people talked about just trying to power their way through it and, getting the concept and moving on. But the reality is that you will find new nuggets of wisdom every time you revisit this, because some things just won't make sense right now, right? Some things won't make sense to an intermediate that will make sense to an advanced player, that, that kind of thing. So, over time, revisiting sections is important, even after you feel like you've mastered them, especially, tone, technique, articulation. I told you guys that I did a whole articulation reset with myself going through the articulation book. I went through the articulation book years ago, but coming back to it, I found new nuggets and little things that I felt like I was doing incorrectly, that, his book was able to kind of shine a light on. So, and again, lots of these exercises will become great warm-ups. And one thing that I will point out, you'll probably notice this pretty quickly, especially in technique and articulation, he uses a lot of exercises that we already do, right? So if you're familiar with Taffanel and Gobert or Reichert, he uses a lot of those exercises and kind of repurposes them to focus on different things inside of the practice books. So you'll recognize a lot of these things, especially as, intermediate and advanced flutists, you will recognize. And he uses a lot of orchestral excerpts, which are fantastic for learning things. So my best advice would be to spend time focusing on what requires the most work, what you personally or your instructor feels like is in the most need for a tune-up, for a challenge. Work at your pace, work slowly, deliberately, get something out of each exercise before you move on. If that makes sense. Yeah, finishing the books is not the goal. I know that seems counterintuitive, but finishing the book is not the goal here. So as far as flute playing goes, what other things do you guys feel like are lifelong pursuits, are lifelong things that you will continue to work on forever?
Long tones.
What, long tones? Yep. Mm-hmm. That's a lot of the tone book. Oh, I hear my puppy. Sorry, guys. Anybody else?
Scales.
Scales. Scales is a forever pursuit, that is for sure. As much as sometimes we don't want them to be, right? Some of these things feel a little tedious sometimes, but
it's kind of exciting when you've been working on scales and then you find a piece and it has a part of that scale in it.
Yeah.
And like, oh, I can already play that part. Move on.
I love doing that with, I love kind of showing that trick to some of my younger students when they're working on something hard. And I'm like, oh, look, there's an F major scale right there. You know your F major scale, right? It's such a good, like, light bulb moment. It's so good. Okay, so I think I've gone over a lot of these quite a bit already, but practice strategies, Trevor Wye did not intend his students to hurt themselves working on these exercises. The intent is to give guidance. He's not writing law. He has a lot of really fantastic wisdom, but holding yourself specifically to everything that he says 100% of the time is not always going to be the healthiest, mentally healthiest way to proceed in flute. Demonstrate the purple and yellow color. let me just grab my aquarium. So what Christopher is referring to is in the tone book, he starts talking in the low register exercises about as you start getting more advanced, building the color palette, right? So
What page?
this is page 9 for me. Now, like I said, I know that my omnibus is a little bit different because I have the blue book, not the white book.
That's okay. It gets me close to the area.
There you go. So he talks about the aquarium from Carnival of the Animals and puts together a couple of excerpts in different keys of that piece. And he talks about with the aquarium, it needs to be a hollow, pure tone, which would be called a yellow tone. And I'm just going to read this real fast for those of you that don't have the book. So it says, think of a deep, dark green water and silent fish swimming gracefully about. Don't forget to practice your B natural first, followed by C in preparation for this exercise. They also talk references back to intonation. Sorry, I am not warmed up, so y'all have to forgive me. So that would be kind of an example of the yellow tone. I'm trying to remember what, yeah. So the Ravel theme that he talks about, the Ravel theme needs to be somewhat darker, richer tone color, which we will call purple. I don't know if you guys can hear the difference. It is kind of difficult over Zoom, but as far as, looking for that richer, darker, and you can experiment with that, because it is going to mean something slightly different to different people, right? I'm so sorry. My dog is barking. Guys, I'm going to be right back. I'm just going to close this door because my puppy is going nuts. She's only a year old, so we forgive her. So yeah, he talks about tone color is kind of hard to wrap your head around to start with. And we can definitely do, like, I don't want to go too far on a tangent about tone color right now. I think that's a good topic for another day. But it can be kind of difficult to just wrap your head around at first, right? We start introducing it and we're like, what do you mean different colors, right? But ultimately it's just different characters. Learning how to make those different characters with, opening or closing the cavity of your mouth, using your upper lip to shape the airstream. lengthening or shortening this tube here. All of those things factor into the different colors that you get, the different intensities, the different timbres that you're able to produce with the flute. The flute has a wide, has a very large color palette. And sometimes it takes many years to be able to find all of those colors. Yes.
So when you're talking about flute color, because you can obviously make different colors using different notes. Some notes are like, higher and some are lower. So when they're talking like in this Trevor Wye book, because I noticed your two different examples were playing two different, they were like a different set of notes. So are they talking tone color and trying to make the same note change? Or
So, yeah, so I would, like I said, I know that this stuff is hard to demonstrate
because the
over.
one was like yellow, and it's like, okay, that section is yellow, and those notes are yellow, and then you changed and did totally different notes and said those are purple.
Yeah. So if I were to play like, that would be like a yellow, whereas that to me would be more of a purple. Do you hear that? Okay.
I hear the difference. Yeah.
So it's about just creating a different character, and ultimately that can totally change the mood of a piece, right? And a lot of times in the beginning, we're kind of all over the place in terms of our tone colors. So like, we might use different colors across different octaves. Whereas as we start to get more advanced, we start to learn how to hone in on like one specific color for across a piece or across a section of a piece.
Gotcha. I understand. That's much better.
Awesome. All right. I'm so sorry. My puppy is still barking, and I'm just losing my train of thought. So choosing a focus, working the program. So starting from the beginning and or whatever section you choose, you feel like you need to work on, and working through that program is a great way to go through. Again, little bits at a time. Don't bite off more than you can chew, because it's easy to do. It's easy to feel like, oh, I'm going to do this section and this section and this section because I need to get good at all the things. I want to be good at all the things. And you will get good at all the things. It's just going to take a little bit of time. I already mentioned some books have built-in practice routine cards, complete daily exercises, for example, that work well. They can be intense for a lot of players. I didn't start working with complete daily exercises and that practice card until I was in college. And even then, that was pretty intense. So be careful with that. Like I said, remember that, Trevor Wye has some amazing things to say, but not everything is law. Perfect. All right. I wanted to throw these back up on the screen, as I do almost every time now. And with these, I wanted to break them down a little bit further as to how you could use them in Trevor Wye, but this topic went a little long. So just going through the practice plan examples, I will never stop posting these to the group because they seem to be helpful. Any questions before we jump into our warm-up? Feeling good? All right. Okay. So today we're going to grab our flute. I'm going to do a quick one because, like I said, it is almost 10 till, so I don't want to hold a bunch of people over. So we're just going to run a slow chromatic scale. So quarter notes, slow, slow, slow. Beautiful. Okay. I would like to do an arpeggio. So starting at low C. I'm just going to demonstrate first. So C, E, G, C, G, E, C. Now each time we go through, we're going to add another note. So we're going to add another note to the arpeggio. All right. Adding the G. Adding the C. Nice job. All right, we're going to just shake out the hands real fast. And now we're going to be real silly. Shaking out the hands. We're going to raise our arms up and out to the side. Try to pinch an imaginary pencil between your shoulder blades. Good job. All right. I know we did a very short warm-up. This was a long topic. I'm going to go ahead and let everybody kind of mute and break off into their own practice for the next 10 minutes or so. If you have questions, unmute, jump in. Okay? Okay, friends, so I know that I ran super long and I do apologize. We've got about 2 minutes left. So I wanted to take a second, see if there were any last minute questions, clarifications, thoughts, tidbits, comments from the. Just got an email to play. Nice! That's awesome! Uh, any ideas for like repertoire? Sorry, the question in the chat was, got an email to play in a flute choir, alto and bass. Any ideas? Only played a little bit of alto. First of all, that's awesome. Low flutes are the best. I would recommend, I don't always love, I don't think that Trevor Wye's alto method is necessarily the best way to go, in my opinion. If you're looking for a solid method, Chris Potter has some pretty incredible alto and bass flute method books that are a little bit better written, in my opinion. So I would recommend looking at those into Chris Potter's. You can also join, I don't know if you're part of the Facebook group, the Low Flutes Facebook group. That is a great place to be as well for low flutes. I play alto. I love my alto, and I can definitely talk all day about some good orchestral excerpts too. I have those as well as solo as well. But yeah, Chris Potter's books. Oh, you mean like actual technique? Yeah, so you're definitely going to need to play it as though you're playing 100% in the low register, low C, airstream straight at the floor, a little bit more relaxed here, and then slower airstream. Not too slow. So if you go too slow, we get whistle tones. But yeah, airstream straight down towards the floor, little bit bigger opening here, and slightly slower. It will take more air too. I have only played a bass flute like one time. I love my alto. Bass flute is on my list of things to own, but I just don't own one at this point. But yeah, it just takes it does take significantly more air, so be prepared to be a little tired. Yes, I would agree with that as well. It can be difficult. Also, my alto has a straight head joint. For those of you that are thinking about an alto flute, if you are a small person like me, get the curved head joint. I thought I was like, I don't know what I was thinking when I bought the straight head joint, but like I have to like rest my elbow on things when I'm playing my alto for too long. So, again, if if your actual like reach is not particularly long, go with the curved head joint. You will be happy. So before we go, I am just going to real quick talk about things that we have coming up. So feel free to log off if you're not interested in hearing about this. Totally get it. Not offended. Coming up, we obviously have this every Thursday night. We're going to keep doing these practice sessions unless for some reason I'm unavailable. These will be going on every Thursday night into infinity. We will vote on the topic every week. I typically don't just take over what the topic's going to be unless I'm particularly inspired, which I have yet to have anything so urgent that I decided to veto what the voted on subject was. But beyond that, I do want to try to put together some smaller duet and choir groups virtually. I think that would be super cool. And I've heard a lot of people say that they would be super interested in that. So be on the lookout for more information on those things. I would love to have anybody that's interested join and play some music and just have a little bit of fun. Low stress, no big deal, right? Third, we do have my workshop. There is a setting in Zoom. Everybody has to use it, and we will definitely talk about it when the time comes. But there is a live performance mode that we can use. There are a few like Zoom orchestras that use that. It's kind of neat. So we'll definitely talk about that when the time comes. I have a workshop. Oh, gotcha. Yeah, it was kind of in like beta during COVID. Yeah. But they've gotten a lot better about it now. I have a workshop coming up. It's called Talent Tune-Up. I have posted it a few times in the group. Basically, it is a practice session workshop. It's 3 days, 3 live sessions. And what we do is the first day, we look at your practice session from a macro view, or rather your goals from a macro view. What do you want to get accomplished in the next year, 6 months, that kind of thing, and start funneling it down into by the month, by the week. By day 2, we're talking about by the week and by the day. So how do we transform our practice session into being sustainable, into being fun, and to getting us where we want to go in terms of our goals. So I saw a huge need for that after our first practice session where we talked about building practice routines. And I just thought it was such a good topic to kind of expand on. So if you were at that first session, this is a big expansion of that. So it's 3-hour-long calls over the course of 3 days, plus the replays if you guys can't be there. 7 days of group chat support so you can troubleshoot all of your practice session woes over the course of the week and we can figure it out. And it's going to be an awesome program. So it's September 1st through the 3rd, and registration is live. So it's normally $70, but it's $40 for group members. So if you're at all interested in that, let me know. I'll get you the registration link and we'll get you all signed up. But it's going to be a great thing, especially if you're struggling with coming up with a practice plan that's working for you. So like I said, every Thursday we'll be here. I'm going to start working on putting together some smaller like chamber groups, that kind of thing. And if ever you have questions, want to comment on, how this session can be better, let me know. Send me a message. If you have any suggestions for the overall group format, let me know. I am here for feedback. So, with that in mind, anything else I can do for anybody at all before I log off?
Thank you.
All right. You guys are awesome. See you next
So are
week.
you. Thanks a lot. Bye, everybody.
Bye.